Hello, today I want to talk about the courage of vulnerability and how it's a personal journey toward mindfulness. What happens when we stop fighting our emotions? I used to think that to be strong, I had to keep my emotions in check. I built walls around myself to protect my heart, to shield it from the pain of vulnerability. I believed that if I didn't guard myself, I would be overwhelmed by feelings of sadness, fear, and anxiety. But as time passed, I realized that something powerful. My defenses weren't making me stronger, but they were keeping me from experiencing life. The more I tried to protect myself, the more I felt disconnected from others, from myself, and from the present moment. Vulnerability, I soon learned, isn't really a weakness, but an opening, a chance to live more authentically and mindfully. This is my journey towards vulnerability and mindfulness, where I choose to lower my defenses and let my emotions flow freely now. The role of defense mechanisms. Like many of us, I grew up learning how to protect myself emotionally. Defense mechanisms, those strategies that we use to avoid pain, hurt, or discomfort, become second nature to me. I learned to ignore certain feelings, suppressed my anger, pushed down my sadness, and pretended everything was fine when it wasn't. At first, these walls served their purpose. They kept me from feeling overwhelmed or exposed. But over time, I noticed that they also kept me from truly experiencing life, the good, the bad, and everything in between. It was like I was living behind a screen, watching the world go by, but never fully engaging with it. This constant defense left me feeling disconnected, like I was always one step removed from what I was truly feeling. And so I began to ask, what would happen if I stopped defending myself and just simply allowed myself to feel? So I started to lower the walls, and it wasn't an easy decision. The thought of lowering my defenses felt terrifying. What if I became overwhelmed by emotions? What if they consumed me entirely? But slowly I began to experiment with letting go, allowing myself to feel my emotions, even the ones I usually tried to avoid. I didn't suppress the sadness when it came, or the fear or the joy. I let it wash over me without trying to control it. At first, it felt raw and unsettling. I felt unaccustomed to feeling my emotions so fully without the usual filters. But there was something strangely freeing about it. I didn't have to fight the emotions anymore. I could simply experience them knowing they were temporary, knowing they would pass. In that space, I found peace, not by resisting what I felt, but by allowing it to be there and to flow through. The shift opened the door to mindfulness in a way I hadn't expected. Mindfulness isn't just about being present with the external world, it's about being present with yourself, with your emotions, and with everything that arises inside of you. In that moment of emotional surrender, I learned to truly be with myself. There's always the fear of feeling too much. As I started to embrace vulnerability, the fear of feeling too much would often resurface. The fear that if I let go completely, I'd be swept away by the intensity of my emotions. The fear that my sadness or anxiety would become all consuming. But then I realized something. Emotions are like waves. They come, they crest, and then they recede. They never stay forever. When I stopped fighting them, I gave myself the space to process them naturally. Instead of being overwhelmed by them, I became more in tune with their ebb and flow. I learned that vulnerability wasn't about letting my emotions control me, but it was about giving myself permission to feel them without any judgment. It was like standing in the middle of a storm, but instead of resisting the wind and rain, I stood tall, feeling it, knowing that the storm would eventually pass. There's strength in surrendering to emotions. As I leaned into my vulnerability, something remarkable happened. I started to feel a strength that came from surrendering, not from fighting. By allowing my emotions to be part of me without resistance, I tapped into a deep well of emotional resilience. I didn't need to protect myself from feeling anymore. I could embrace each emotion with compassion, knowing it would not break me. Vulnerability, I discovered, was not a weakness. It was a source of inner power. It allowed me to connect more deeply with myself and to understand my emotions more clearly and to approach each situation with much greater clarity. It was a form of self-acceptance, a way to say, I am human and it's okay to feel all of this. As I let go of my defenses, I found a new strength. Not the strength of armor or walls, but the strength that comes from being open and honest with myself. Vulnerability became a path to connection. Something else I noticed as I became more vulnerable was the way my relationships with others began to change. When I allowed myself to be raw, to show my true feelings without shame or fear, others responded in kind. I didn't need to pretend to be strong or perfect. I could just be real. And when I did, the people around me felt permission to do the same. I realized that vulnerability just doesn't connect us to ourselves. It connects us to others. When we drop the mask and defenses, we meet each other on a deeper, more authentic level. And in those moments of shared vulnerability, I felt a sense of belonging and empathy that I never experienced before. The more I embraced vulnerability, the more I could relate to others, not just from a place of intellectual understanding, but from an emotional connection. I began to see that there are all vulnerable in our own ways. And in that vulnerability, there is strength, grace, and beauty. Allowing my emotions to flow freely didn't just change how I felt, it changed how I lived. I became more present, more mindful, and more at peace with myself. No longer did I feel their need to constantly control or hide my feelings. I could face life head on, and with all of its uncertainties and joys, knowing I didn't have to protect myself from what I felt. I also noticed how my mental and emotional health improved. Instead of holding on to the past pain and fear, I allowed myself to process everything in real time. I stopped running away from discomfort. And in doing so, I learned to accept it as part of my journey. Embracing vulnerability has been one of the most liberating experiences of my life. It's not easy and it's not always comfortable, but it's brought me closer to myself and to others. The courage to feel and to let go of my defenses has given me freedom to experience life fully without fear of judgment, without fear of being too much. As I continue this journey toward mindfulness, I've come to realize that vulnerability isn't just a path to emotional healing. It's a path to living more authentically. It's an invitation to be real, to be raw, and to be present in every moment. And in that presence, I find peace. Are you living with defense mechanisms that keep you from living your best life? Do the defense mechanisms feel like you are always having to defend yourself? Please go to mammothedge.com and take the life assessment. I would love to support you in learning to live vulnerably and mindfully. Thank you.